Today we're going to talk about how you can rip men from their homes and families and send them to fight and die against alien monstrosities on the battlefields of the 41st millennium. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy-focused 40k channel where we're all about making the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. So it's Conscripts on the review today for the Imperial Guard. For an in-depth tactics review, we'll be taking a look over their datasheet, any of the obvious combos and synergies on the battlefield, and how I would run them in games of 40k at the moment. Now, Conscripts are certainly one of my favourite Guard units. In the silliness of 7th edition I was running 3 50-man blobs led by various fighty characters from all over the galaxy. Then when 8th dropped, they briefly became one of the most powerful things in the game. Their 3-point cost, combining with very efficient orders, meaning that they could theoretically throw enough last shots to end most threats in the game, despite their very bad ballistic skill. They have of course been hit by multiple nerfs since then, but I still think that they do have some interesting combos and synergies that you can do with them on the table. In the background, conscripts represent hastily conscripted men raised from surrounding planets in dire situations, where the Imperial Guard is really struggling to maintain the manpower on the front line, and is reduced to conscripting untrained men with only the briefest of instructions, because their professional soldiers have got whittled down through the meat grinder. Some regiments have specific conscript badges and markings, such as Cadian White Shields, who have a white stripe down the centre of their helmet, denoting their junior status. They often might be comprised of men too old or too young to normally serve on the front line, and until they have proven themselves, they're denied any special weapons or heavy fire support, being issued with a simple suit of flak armour and a standard pattern lasgun, and fielded in large numbers that are sent into the heart of the fighting as expendable troops. The few survivors may join the platoon's regular infantry squads in time, though any individual conscript's odds are not particularly good. Let's see what they can do in their current state in 8th edition then. So conscripts are a troop's choice for Codex Imperial Guard. They're now fielded in squads of 20 to 30 conscripts, rather than the enormous blobs of 50 that you could get, and they cost 4 points per model, which was also an increase from the previous 3. Each conscript is armed with a lasgun and frag grenades, and they have a fairly similar stat line to the standard guardsmen, except their weapon skill and ballistic skill is only 5+, and their leadership is a pitiful 4. This means without other characters to support them and lead them into battle, they'll run away ridiculously easily, and it's a fact that you pretty much need to mitigate if you are fielding them en masse. The conscripts only have one special rule, and that rule is raw recruits, which represents their lack of discipline and misunderstanding or misinterpreting orders. Basically, each time you issue an order from an officer to a conscript squad, on a 4+, the order applies as normal, and otherwise the order has no effect at all, and no other orders can be issued to the conscript unit for the duration of this turn. I find this one an interesting counterpoint, as typically one unit buffs such as orders would be very powerful on conscripts with a 30-man unit, so only making them go off half the time is certainly a decent nerf. On the face of it, conscripts just look like a really bad unit compared with the infantry squad, who pay the exact same amount of points per model, for a stat line that is decidedly worse, no weapon options whatsoever, and on top of that they can't even take orders well. However, they do still have some advantages, which we'll talk about in a second. In terms of ways to make your conscripts stronger, of course regiment choice is one of the most important ones, and to my mind there really is no regiment that's more standout than the Valhallans for big conscript squads. The main purpose of conscripts is to be a durable screen of infantry to protect the rest of your army, and having bad leadership really messes with that, as it means that your opponent can inflict some free casualties on them when they shoot them, just because some are liable to run away. The Valhallan buff cuts the amount of fleeing conscripts in half, but it's really their relic which is the absolute standout for the Valhallan Codex, which is Petrov's Mark 45. Their relic bolt pistol, that basically means if the conscripts try and fail a morale test, then this bolt pistol shoots one dead, and they don't take any further casualties. It's pretty much pseudo-fearless conscripts from the Valhallans, and even if this relic bearer is lost, they're a lot more durable than they would be to morale, due to only taking half the casualties. The other regiments will be more focused on actually dealing damage. Cadians could potentially use overlapping fields of fire to get them to hit on 4s again, which is quite a big deal when you're hitting on 5s before. Catachans will be pretty useful for having strength 4 conscripts. In addition to a Ministorum Priest and Strachan, you could be hitting with 90 attacks from a single squad. When even hitting on 5s, that's going to make a mark. Mordian conscripts will overwatch as well as they shoot. Talon will be a bit more manoeuvrable in terms of advancing and still being able to keep up some fire, and Armageddon and Vostron will be able to get a few more shots in range than otherwise normal. In general though, I do think that Valhallan sticks out far better than all of the rest in terms of making conscripts work. Now let's talk about character buffs then. We already mentioned orders, and despite that only 4+ chance to get an order off, it's still absolutely worth having an order available for your conscripts. If you are taking them in big 30-man squads, then getting first rank fire, second rank fire could potentially make your conscript squads shoot 120 times in the shooting phase for an 120 point unit plus an officer. It might well be worth a command point to re-roll that if you do fail it and a lot of lasguns are in range, as it does amplify their damage output by quite a bit. Move, move, move is another great order for them, as conscripts are mainly going to be used as a screening unit. Getting that screen all the way up into the enemy's face and really making a nuisance for their movement is really not a bad idea either. Now conscripts really are one of the units that can most benefit from character support. If you're using a non-Valhallan regiment, then a commissar is really not a bad pickup for leadership 8. And their summary execution rule, it means that they'll at least have to take a fair few casualties before they start losing more to morale, rather than having a good chance of plenty of them running off as soon as you take a single casualty. Throwing a commissar or lord commissar in there is the absolute bare minimum for what I would do for conscript morale. Next we come to psychic buffs, which are in my opinion one of the main reasons to actually take conscripts. Again, they're best used as a durable screen, so if you can make them a durable screen with a 4+ armor save and -1 to hit through a pair of Astra Buffs, then they're going to cause far more problems for your opponent and can really help to gum up the midfield and give your opponent some difficult target priority choices. Do they shoot the conscripts that are right next to them taking objectives, even though those conscripts are abnormally durable for their points cost? Or do they focus on things further away, maybe with less damage efficiency, and allow the conscripts to be there and be a nuisance next turn? The Psychers also have the option of Mental Fortitude, a warp charge 4 psychic power that can make a unit within 12 inches of the Psyker fearless. If you are running a big unit of conscripts and you're not using Valhallan, then this is actually a very credible way of making them an enduring threat on the table. The main downside being that if you go second, your opponent might be able to shoot them up before you even manage to cast this, and you might well need to spend 2 CP to keep some of the units intact. Plus there is always the potential for this to get denied if you are anywhere near the front line, so it's not quite as reliable, but for 15 points you can't really go too far wrong with an Astropath. The main price that you're paying is really the opportunity cost of not taking Night Shroud, Psychic Barrier or Psychic Maelstrom instead of that power. Priests are also a pretty reasonable addition to a conscript blob, particularly a Cast-Cham one. Turning those 30 attacks in close combat into 60 attacks is no joke, even when you are only hitting on 5s, and it's a lot easier for a priest to support big units like conscripts compared with smaller units like 10-man guardsman squads. If you're playing Cast-Cham, then it's probably worth taking Strachan along as well for 90 attack strength 4 conscripts. If you can keep them from running, then that's not a threat that a lot of armies are going to want to charge. You could potentially charge a mob of orc boys and do well over 10 casualties just with your conscripts, which would be pretty fun. There is also a warlord trait in Draconian Discipline that can be used to keep your conscripts fearless. Basically, if this trait is given to a commissar or lord commissar, then instead of their summary execution rule, if you fail a morale test, then the conscript unit will just take D3 casualties and leave it at that. So this is quite a powerful rule, and again, like Petrov's Mark 45, could be used to make multiple units of conscripts fearless on your front lines. The main opportunity cost is of course that it eats your warlord trait, and there are powerful options to the Imperial Guard, including Grand Strategist and Old Grudges, and it's a bit painful to give them up just to make sure that the conscripts actually work, and of course if you're using this guy on the front lines, there's a non-zero chance that he could get sniped. Conscripts are pretty interesting in that they have a lot of synergy with some non-Imperial Guard units. There are a few other Imperial units that can help the leadership or improve armor saves of units, and conscripts as one of the biggest horde type units of the Imperium are often the ones that benefit most. For example, Inquisitors can also give them their leadership, and leadership 9 is certainly no joke at all. They also have Psychic Fortitude, another spell that's basically acts the same as Mental Fortitude, so could potentially keep another unit of conscripts from running with psychic powers. And the Ordo Malleus power through knowledge, can give conscripts a 5+ invul save, which I do believe could stack with Psychic Barrier to give them a 4+ invul save on your front lines should you want it. In a similar vein, Celestine can also help out Astra Militarum, giving them a 6+ invul save, again that can be improved with Psychic Barrier. And if you wanted another source of fearless conscripts, then you can get a relic Custodes Vexilla that allows all Imperium units to auto-pass morale when they're within 6 inches of it. So that's yet another way to get conscripts to not run away, and this time on a very, very durable character indeed. I'm sure there are a few other examples out there, but it is quite interesting to see that you can make some very durable Imperium infantry with invul saves and fearless if you put a couple of codexes together. In terms of stratagems, again as they're a decent unit, the Conscripts are a pretty decent receiver of stratagem type buffs. Against Chaos, as usual, one of the single most destructive is Vengeance for Cadia, and if you manage to combine this with first rank fire, second rank fire, will stack a horrendous amount of AP nothing wounds on pretty much any Chaos target. We already mentioned that Cadian overlapping fields is good. The Vostroyans have their Firstborn Pride, which could also get them hitting as well as standard Guardsmen. You've always got the 2 command points for auto-passing morale should you absolutely need to keep your Conscripts around and a bunch are going to run away. But possibly my favourite stratagem for the Conscripts is Take Cover, as it's just 1 command point to give them 1 better armour save. Potentially if you've combined that with Psychic Barrier, then you can have Conscripts saving on a 3+ armour save and pretending that they're in power armour or something. So how would I go about using Conscripts in game? In general, I'd be most tempted to take big 30-man squads of them, as their large squad size for making good use of character buffs, psychic powers and stratagems really is their main selling point, in addition to the benefits that you get from having large squads, having more control of where you remove casualties from, making them better at screening, and potentially better and more flexible when it comes to close combat, being potentially able to gum up quite a lot of units all with one big charge. So if I were fielding them, I'd typically be fielding them in units of 30, and I'd want to use one of the various ways that we've mentioned to try and make them pseudo-fearless, whether that's Draconian Discipline, an Astropath for Mental Fortitude, or Valhallan for Petrov's Mark 45. If we are using any buffing characters that are going to be vital to them, I'd want to be deploying that character out of line of sight where possible, kept safe from enemy sniper fire, because we really don't want the entire unit of Conscripts running just because we lose that character. I'd then be trying to use the Conscripts as a good screening unit to keep the enemy off your back, whether you're using some allied fighty characters to run forward with your main army, or whether you just want to have another line of defence in between the enemy and your tanks. With their big unit size, I would say that Conscripts do screening better than your standard infantry squads. The reason being, you have more control of where the casualties go. If you have 2 infantry squads next to each other, then your opponent can just blow up the one that they want. If they have to fire into 20 Conscripts, then you can take off the 10 Conscripts that are least useful for your screen, and maybe force your opponent to kill more of them if they want to get through into the juicy contents of your army behind. With this in mind, you'd have to think about what sort of screening you'd be wanting to do. Whether you're just trying to move block, you could be moving your Conscripts up right into the midfield, maybe with move, and create a line across the enemy deployment zone, meaning that they might not even be able to move out of it on their turn 1. Otherwise, you could be looking at deep strike screening, trying to think about where that 9-inch bubble from every Conscript is going to hopefully push the enemy back and make sure that they're having to drop somewhere in their own deployment zone rather than the midfield or behind your lines. Or you could be tightly screening your own units from close combat, maybe wrapping a whole bunch of Conscripts around them so the enemy physically can't get to your units in close combat because there's just too many of them in the way. All of these are potentially pretty powerful and can be a reasonable use for Conscripts in the army. You might also be able to chain out the unit to get on an objective as well while doing these purposes, as they are objective secured troops, and might even be able to steal it away from enemy more elite units right from under their noses. Having a big meaty squad like this means they will have significant firepower if they want the last model gone off that objective, and that's another advantage over infantry squads, where in general you're only going to need to remove 10 men. Throughout the game, I'd certainly be looking to use things like Psychic Barrier or Night Shroud to make them tougher, and certainly considering the use of Take Cover whenever the opponent's trying to chew through the screen. Overall, Conscripts just aren't as good as infantry squads at dealing damage, so if you're looking to deal damage with infantry, then you know which way to go. With a bit of support though, as bodies on lines, I think that they can be more efficient than the infantry squad, despite their low morale and having the same points cost. You just need to make sure that they have some decent cheap support characters to keep them in line and provide some durability buff. Unfortunately, the way things are, Conscripts are just a little bit less competitive than infantry squads, at least for general play. But I think that they are a little bit underestimated. People just see them that they're the same points cost as infantry and dismiss them completely, without taking into account the powerful benefits of having an absolutely huge squad that has less obvious advantages all of its own. As always, let me know if you've got experience fielding Conscripts down in the comments below. I would personally love to see these guys be a little bit stronger in the game. I really did enjoy my all-infantry armies back in 7th edition and early 8th. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where we have regular guard content coming out all the time. And if you are enjoying watching my content regularly, I do have a Patreon page which is down in the description below. Making all of these videos takes a lot of time, typically up to 2 hours per video, and I've been managing to release 2 videos a day for a very long time now. So you can imagine the amount of hours that's gone in. All of this is possible due to the channel's Patrons allowing me to take more time from my regular job to focus on the channel. So if you are watching regularly, any contribution as a small thank you is greatly appreciated. In any case, thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you guys next time.